My name is Arthur, and this is Entry Points. When I started Entry Points several years ago, I recorded and released 12 episodes before I stopped and took a hiatus from it for several years. So as I decided to resume the podcast, there was one episode in particular that stood out to me as one of my favorite conversations among several wonderful guests who took the time to sit with me. Scoop Jackson has had a remarkable career spanning over 30 years as a professional journalist, primarily focusing on music and sports. He serves as the president and founder of Strong Island Media, where his journey has taken him through various media platforms, including magazines, television, and books. So I hope you enjoyed this classic episode of Entry Points from the original series, featuring my guest and friend, Scoop Jackson.
I'm a big believer in preparation. Mm-hmm. And I think, what do they say? I forgot who said, if you're not confident, that means you're not prepared.
We're moving into 25 years of your professional career as a writer, as a journalist?
Yeah, 25. Yeah, graduate school, finished Howard in 91, and right out of there, I started kind of out the gate, just like, I graduated from Howard in May of 91, and I incorporated my company, Strong Island Media, with Strong Island Productions in September 91.
Oh, right out of the gate.
Yeah, I came right out of the gate. I knew what I was on some hustle shit.
So now 25 years later, there's a lot more life experience.
Exactly. Yeah, I kind of feel that way now. And even going on and doing the things that I was doing early on, I've always had this belief that the things I was doing at the time were connected to all my life experiences at that time. Mm-hmm. Always put a little bit of yourself in what you do. And in my case, it was writing. That's something Brian Burwell told me a long time ago, after I was already in the game. But I've always done that. I did that in undergraduate school at Xavier. I did it at Howard, when it came time to do my thesis, my master's thesis. Mm-hmm. And I did it on the pro-social effect that hip-hop can have on the black community. Mm-hmm. Now, at the time, I didn't realize that I was one of the first people in the country to ever do an academic study on hip-hop as a music culture. But all I was doing was taking what I loved and what I was into and what I felt was a part of me and bringing it to academia. I was writing about hip-hop. I happened to be in graduate school. I had to do a thesis to graduate. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, so it's just all right. Yeah. So that's my life experience coming into my work, and what I have to do with my profession at the time was being a student. Mm-hmm. It's no different than now. You bring it into there. Yeah, maybe the application is different, the execution of that is different, but it's essentially the same thing. You go through your life and you bring along with you your life experiences. And my life experience was hip hop, and part of that is what does it say? Make it a method out of your madness. What do you listen to all that damn music for? Turn that down. All this and that. All that stuff you go through, especially being here in Chicago, and you know this as well as I do. This isn't a huge hip hop place.
No, it's not.
Right. So imagine in hip hop's infancy.
Yeah.
Like not now where it's like 30 years old itself, where it's had time to grow and you have hip hop artists coming from here.
Yeah.
I'm talking about in its infancy, when we were deeply rooted in house, deeply rooted in stepping music, still deeply rooted in the blues, where black folks will listen to all type of rock stations. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All that stuff.
Yeah.
Imagine like listening and being like in the concrete of hip hop and trying to survive that here.
The thing about this city in particular is not even an important role, but just how the fabric of both sports and music and black participation in sports and music frames the context of this city. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because Louis Armstrong came here first. Yeah. He didn't leave New Orleans and go to New York City.
He came here. Yeah. That's just musically. Let's talk culture. Where did that man go when he went into exile?
Right. Muhammad Ali?
He came right here in Chicago. I've always said, people ask me all the time, why have you always stayed in Chicago? Why haven't you moved? I had plenty of opportunity. We were building Slam Magazine. They were like, you got to move to New York. When we started Double XL, it was like, you got to move to New York. I'm like, if this city is good enough for Oprah, Farrakhan, Barack Obama, and Michael Jordan, who the hell am I to say that I can't exist. And these are, especially from a black context, damn near the pillars of our current cultural generation.
You're right.
And they remained here for the height of their existence or careers. And nowhere you above any one of them. You know what I'm saying? So there's something here that you need to hold on to. And like you said about Louis Armstrong, like I just mentioned Muhammad Ali, a core of what they became started off when they set foot here.
Yes.
Martin Luther King came in, it changed his life. Remember, he said, I've never been to any place in this country as racist.
Yeah.
He didn't realize what this was about. But that's a part of who we are. Chicago is the place that made Martin Luther King realize what racism was really about. But Chicago was also the only place in the country that wouldn't allow Donald Trump to have a rally.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This is Chicago. So, just as you were saying about the fabric of the city is special. The city is special, and all the nuances that go on with the city is special. And when we're speaking musically, you look at the impact it has had on just the world. And for me personally, getting back to your original question of how hard it is to break that Chicago sound and get out of that and really be into something different. And at the time, really being into hip hop was almost strange. You could almost be outcast because that ain't what Chicago is about.
So you had to write an abstract in order to get the thesis approved, right? Because that must have been a hell of an abstract.
You know what, Arthur?
Thinking about it, that must have been a hell of an abstract.
Arthur, the abstract proposal I had to write to get this done, it was a hell of an abstract. It was the fact that, one, at the time, we don't think anybody had ever done it before. So that made it rare within itself. And two, I was trying to do it at a black university. And
to make a statement?
No, I just happened to be at Howard University.
Okay.
But I'm saying this to you is that we have a tendency as black people to be more harsh, be more critical.
Oh, sure.
Of our own contributions to society and our own culture to anybody else. Trying to get that approved at a black university. If I was at Brown University, if I was at Cornell, if I was at Notre Dame, if I was at, University of Texas, no problem. If I was at Northwestern, where I almost went, no problem. They had open arms. You want to do your black thing here? Go ahead, do your thing. Black folks put the brakes on stuff so quick.
Yes, they do.
I had the fight I had to go through to get this, because they didn't even look at hip hop as real music.
That's the thing. That's where I'm coming from.
There it is, and that's what I had to go. I had to fight months for that, for a study.
Sure.
For an academic study. We're black people. And you think, oh no, this is us doing us? No, it doesn't work that way. Especially older black individuals who don't even get hip hop. And this is 1990.
Right.
My thing was like, all right, I'm gonna prove these blank's wrong. Now you keep telling me no about this, and I know what this is. You all don't know what this is. I know what this is. I'm going to prove to you that this is worthy of a study. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna prove it, and alongside, I'm getting my damn paper. It drove.
Did you want to write about sports then, or was music your primary focus? So you wanted to be a music journalist?
I didn't even want to be a music journalist because that wasn't the thing I wanted to do was be involved in music at some point, and that was be a program director at a radio station. Because I, as much as I love house music and what was going on here, outside of the music they were playing on the radio, like WBMX, the hot mixes and all that stuff, like you said, real house music really wasn't being played on the radio here. Right. So you still had black music stations, but what they were playing, was very segmented playlists. Like you would hear the same 12 songs, this, that, and the other. I'm like, they don't know good music. So I want to be a program director. I take over these radio stations and run it the right way because, we know how to deal with music. Or it was like me and my partner Brad always wanted to have our own magazine. We'd look at Rolling Stone and we'd look at the Village Voice and we look at those magazines and be like, we could do this. We could do this. So it wasn't necessarily that form of being a journalist. like I said, I was at BET doing production work, and I was like, if I want to be, and I was on the way to get into television production. I happened to be at BET because that's why I wound up doing my practicum at while I was in graduate school.
Mm-hmm.
So it was music based, but it wasn't necessarily to be a journalist. At some point I just knew all the time in my life that music was going to be a part of my life. Sports was always just a passion. I never looked at sports professionally. Like, real talk, it wasn't until I came out of grad school and I graduated in 91. We started Slam in 94. It was really 3 years. I had never even, by the time we started Slam Magazine, I had never written anything about sports ever.
So then why start a basketball magazine?
They called me. The publisher started the magazine, and after 2 issues, the entire staff got hired by Vibe magazine. Vibe and Slam started out the exact same month.
Okay.
I was aware of both magazines, and because I had seen Slam in the store.
Okay.
I seen it in a store. I had heard about Vibe because I was writing at the time I was writing for Rap Sheet in Los Angeles.
Yeah, okay.
So I was doing that. I was dealing with writing stuff for The Source on occasion in New York. I was freelancing.
Mm-hmm.
I had my own magazine. And because of what I did, because of my thesis at Howard, I was, writing about music, writing about hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
I never heard anything from Vibe. I sent my stuff in to, I forgot, it was Russell and somebody else before Jonathan Van Meter came over and ran it when they first started off.
When did Quincy?
It's Quincy and Russell.
Or is it Quincy's money?
It was Quincy's, and Russell was actually the editor-in-chief, quote unquote. But I forgot who was the person that was actually doing the managing editor that was actually doing it, because Russell wasn't a magazine guy. And whoever that person was that was doing it, that's why I sent a stack of files.
Mm-hmm.
And that was before Vibe even started. And then the Tretch preview issue hit at the exact same time as Slam's first magazine
issue
hit.
Came out.
With Larry Johnson on the cover.
Okay.
Right? I took the same stack of stuff I sent to Vibe and sent it to Slam. Now, I had never written about basketball. Publisher never got it. Right? But because I was working so much, and I was doing journalistic prostitution, because I was writing for anybody that was going to pay, He had seen my work, and I had my own magazine at the time. We had The Agenda. Mm-hmm. He had seen my byline and seen my work at so many different places. And he liked what I was saying, that he basically tracked me down here in Chicago.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. Basically, hey, my name is Dennis Page. Started this magazine called Slam Man. I said, dude, I know all about you. I sent you a stack of stuff.
Uh-huh.
I've been trying to get down with you all since, the first issue. He's like, good. He said, well, basically my whole staff went over to Vibe, because Vibe was Time Warner at the time. They had Time Warner checks. Mm-hmm. Slam was a small independent magazine. Mm-hmm. You'd be a fool not to go. And he had 5 people on staff, and they took 4 of them. So, he was like, look, man, all I want to know is, do you write or can you write about basketball? I can't remember the exact word. Do you write or can you write? It was one of those 2 words. And my answer was like, man, I'm from Chicago. Basketball is what we do. That's all we do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
All he said was good. I had never had any intent on sports it never came to conversation. I would read Sports Illustrated all the time, but I never put myself in that position because the outlets weren't there. Mm-hmm. You got to understand, Arthur, there was USA Today, there was local newspapers, there was Sporting News, Sport Magazine, and Sports Illustrated. Other than that, there were no outlets. I never sought out sports at all. It actually came to me.
Well, clearly it was a perfect fit. I mean, basketball and music really have gone hand in hand.
Exactly.
So it couldn't have been the transition from music journalism to sports journalism. Couldn't have been that challenging.
No, not at all.
But it probably gave you an advantage because of your music background. You were able to use a lot of references. You would be able to correlate things. I know you hold Allen Iverson in high regard.
Yeah.
And he is like, if hip hop were a sports figure.
Exactly.
I mean, Iverson really embodies that whole attitude of hip hop.
Yeah.
You developed a personal relationship with Allen Iverson.
Yeah, definitely, without question. But it wasn't about music though. Nothing ever. It was just about. I think we saw each other in each other. Because when he was trying to start off his career, we were trying to build Slam Mag. So our careers kind of parallel.
There's like an urban legend that you were going to walk off the job. If
Oh,
they
yeah,
didn't put
without
Allen-
question. Yeah,
That's true.
that's true. That's true. That's a true story. That is a true story. Look, you heard about Allen Iverson's story, when he was in high school, and, the whole being wrongly accused, being in jail, one of the top players in the country, and people forget he was one of the top football players in the country, too. And you kind of heard from the racist situation we're down in Virginia where he got jailed. So you kind of heard that story. But it was in the middle of his freshman year at Georgetown that summer. Cass knew he could play, but he was allowed to play in the Kenner League, which is like the semi-pro summer league in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area, right? It's pretty famous. It's like the Drew League in California. And he was literally averaging 50 points a game. Averaging. You're like, Iverson? You mean the kid from Georgetown that was the Big East defensive player of the year? Iverson? Yes, he's killing these cats. And I'm like, okay. And the beauty we had at Slam Magazine, and that's what the foundation of the magazine was always about. That's what Dennis Page always wanted to do. He wanted to be everything Sports Illustrated wasn't, the stories they weren't telling. He basically wanted the magazine to be all about basketball street legends. He didn't want to tell any NBA stories. He was that Jersey cat that knew everybody. Like, walked up to Magic Johnson, was like, Curtis Jones from Detroit, who was like the greatest legend ever. Curtis Jones could whoop your ass. He would tell Magic that right to his face. But Magic would be like, you're right.
You're right.
Magic would be like, you're absolutely right. And nobody told Curtis Jones' story, and that's what Dennis Page wanted to do. He wanted to use Slam as that outlet to tell Curtis Jones' story, which is something we did. So when we got word that Allen was averaging 50 in the Kenner League, we're like, I got to go down and check this out, right? So I happened to be in New York at the time at the U.S. Open. So I just took a quick trip to D.C., to go see. Arthur, I can tell you that I walked into this game he was at, and it was halftime. And all I saw was him arguing with whoever his coach was.
Yeah.
Like, they spent the entire halftime, like, screaming, cussing each other out. His team was down by 22 points. All I can tell you is I tell you this. His team won the game, and he finished with 62.
God.
Right then, I called Dennis Page. I said, look, I know you got to put this cat on the next cover of the magazine. He's got to be on there. He's like, we've never had a college basketball player on the magazine. He's not going to sell. And I'm like, trust me, man, what I just saw, talk about what you talking about making this magazine different than anybody else, doing stuff that nobody else is doing. This dude is it. I'm telling you, I seen it.
Yeah,
I seen it. I seen it. And he's like, it ain't going to happen. I said, Dennis, if you don't do this shit, I'm out. I'm like, I'm gone. I'm done. He said, Scoop, let me tell you one thing. You may know this journalism shit. You may know the writing part of this. You don't know publishing. We got to make money. That's what this thing's about. Nobody knows who Allen Iverson is. I cannot put him on the cover of a magazine in Los Angeles and people care and pick it up. It doesn't work that way. But to prove your point, okay, we'll do it. Okay, so what he did was smart. He did a split cover, Allen Iverson, and I think Akeem Olajuwon.
Split cover like how Double XL did Jay-Z and Master P?
No, we were already waiting. We did Jay-Z and Master P, not for...
But I'm saying same magazine, same issue,
yeah,
same
exactly,
time.
Right, exactly.
Same catalog number, but different covers.
Yeah, but we didn't do that for that reason. See, we wanted to get something new on the cover of Double XL when we started, and P was new and Jay was established. Jay had been on the cover of magazines, P hadn't.
Okay.
So with the Allen Iverson thing, it was more regional. Like, we may be able to get away with selling Allen Iverson on the East Coast. Down South ain't going to get it. The Midwest ain't going to get it. L.A., Texas, they not going to get it. So when I say split covers, Allen Iverson got regional East.
Oh,
Akeem, right.
Okay.
So it's the same concept.
So the books didn't get to the same market at the same
Exactly.
time. I understand. Okay.
Anyway, so we did that. And to be honest with you, it wound up being the worst selling magazine in Here's the Slam magazine. It was horrible. To the day, Dennis is like, I'm trying to tell you, I know what I'm doing, and I've been publishing longer than you've been alive. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell me what's supposed to go on the cover of magazines and what can't and what sells and not sell. So he proved his point to me as a smart publisher, and he didn't do it to bow down or say, I'm scared of me walking. That wasn't even the thing. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, and I didn't say particularly I was gonna walk forever. I could have walked and come back. I was like, look, but I had to stand the ground. I had to stand some ground on what I believed. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But he also had to prove a point. Like, look, if we in bed together making this magazine, making this project, and we're all in on this, then there'll be some times where points are gonna have to be made.
But you were his guy, so
Tony and I were his guy. We were the guy. We were doing it, you know, and we understood our importance to the thing. Where you know, where if he was, it's like this. Everybody understood their role, and there wasn't gonna be any divorce. But everybody had to prove, you know, do and stood on what we stood on because we were strong in our beliefs. And Dennis was strong on his belief, and he proved his belief. So, with that said, about that being a worst-selling issue, he proved his point. But what he didn't expect, and none of us expected, was the impact that had on the career of the magazine because of our relationship we were able to build, not just me, but with Slam Magazine and Allen Iverson. The next time he was on the cover was the time that the NBA banned him after he won MVP of the All-Star game, and he came to the press conference in a do-rag over his braids because he had braided his hair for the first time. And the NBA basically banned him from doing interviews.
because it wasn't the right image that they wanted.
Right.
Yeah.
But here's where it falls into play. He broke that ban to talk to us. And that's when we put him on the cover in his Sixers uniform with a basketball. Who's afraid of Allen Iverson? So nobody else had him. Nobody else did him. Nobody was thinking about that. We were the only ones. And the only reason he did it was because we would look out for him and did something on him. We were one of the first magazines to ever do something, put him on the cover.
I see.
Of that Slam.
I see.
There was loyalty there. And every magazine after that, Allen Iverson was the bank. Anytime the sales would be down, let's put Allison. Come up with an Iverson story. Let's do him.
Mm-hmm.
He was our Jordan. As far you put Jordan on the cover of magazine, your magazine's going to sell.
Right.
Allen Iverson became that dude. Keep in mind that the Allen Iverson, back to your original thing, the Allen Iverson connection was never about hip-hop. It was just more about black culture. At the time, my hair was braided. You get what I'm saying? We would see each other.
Right.
So we compare whose braids were tighter.
Right.
I'm a journalist walking to a press conference, something like that. Yeah, ain't nobody like me, man. Ain't nobody like him.
Mm-hmm.
We the same dude.
Mm-hmm.
We dressing the same.
Yeah.
We talk the same. We're both small in stature, both, not supposed,
Mm-hmm.
We always saw, and we've always supported that.
Now, let me ask you about XXL.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that you not only had irons in the fire, but you had big irons in the fire.
Mm-hmm.
Slam, XXL, and I think when I first met you, you were starting to do writing and even production work for Nike.
Yeah, probably was. Yeah, yep. Mm-hmm.
So were those three things running concurrently, or did you let Slam go to work on XXL?
No. I was, because it wasn't just that. It was also throwing the mix. I was also doing both of the NBA magazines, Hooping Inside stuff. So Slam and XXL are under the same publishing company. So I had a contract with Harris Publications to do those. Had a separate contract with the NBA, and I was helping the NBA also launch NBA TV.
Wow. And ownership of Strong Island Media made that even possible, that you could even do something.
Because I was able to, every contract I had is through my corporation, through my company.
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't just hiring me as an individual, they're hiring my company to do service work for them. Part of the reason, like you said, having your own company, you're able to subcontract other things out and have in place situations where other writers or other individuals that are in the position to create content, to create media content, can take advantage of places where you leave or where you're not there.
Mm-hmm.
That's the exact way it's supposed to go. So I had those contracts, but the first one I had to leave actually was XXL.
Okay. Oh, okay.
After 2 years of being involved in actually running XXL and being editor-in-chief of XXL, I was traveling. The routine was I would leave Monday morning and come back Thursday night. So I did that. That was my commute to New York.
Oh, so you were doing XXL in New York City?
Yes, I had to be there. When I was editor-in-chief, I had to do that.
I
For the year I was editor-in-chief,
mm-hmm.
I had to be there. So that's a hands-on situation.
Mm-hmm.
And we were still doing Slam Magazine, so that had to stop because it was like, this isn't, it just became too much. I had to make a decision. It's good. So we hired Elliot.
Okay.
Elliot Wilson to be the editor-in-chief, and I just came back to do my regular things. Just went back to writing stories for Elliot until I just, was, all right, cool. Y'all can handle it. I'm gone. You know, Nike and Double XL never really overlapped.
Did Nike call you?
Yes, they did call me.
So basically, you haven't applied for a job since.
No, I haven't. Nah, I haven't. I haven't applied for an application.
Howard admissions.
Maybe, yeah, I'm thinking. You might be right. I'm thinking around then, man. I'm thinking around then. But here's the deal, man. The work speaks for itself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the whole. I've tried to tell young writers about, when they ask about, what do I have to do? Can you tell me what's the key and all that and that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, the key is this. You make yourself so important that the people that you are interviewing, the people that you are doing stories on, are just as excited to meet you as you are to meet them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's about putting work in. You know what I'm saying? So when I walk into a room and LeBron James screams my name before I say anything to him, that's what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know? And that comes from work. That's the key. You know what I'm saying? That stops you from having to fill out applications.
Yeah, okay.
I'm a big proponent in speaking without saying anything. And I learned that from listening to Dick Gregory. Dick Gregory told me one time when I was in graduate school at Howard, because he came to speak, and he basically said the first thing you have to do is get them to listen. And once you get them to listen, then you got them. But it's on you to hold them.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I've always been a big proponent of looking at the landscape of younger individuals. And when you get to a certain place in your career, and not necessarily being established, but get to a certain place where you ascertain not just notoriety, but respect. Respect where people start to look at you as not only are you accomplishing something, but you getting to a place that could be a destiny for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the reason why I always present myself the way that I do. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where I won't wear a shirt and a tie.
Mm-hmm.
Where I'll be more comfortable. Where I'll make you feel more comfortable by me being there.
Mm-hmm.
Where I can be more relatable. Like, say if I walk into a room where there's a career fair, and you have all these professional individuals speaking to high school or college kids, and they're all representing their companies and doing this, that, and the other, and they're all suited
Right.
and dressed up and something like that.
Right.
If I come in there with some sneaks on, you know what I'm saying? If I got a LeBron Soldier 10s on and nobody got them yet,
Or some black patent leather superstars.
there you go. There you go. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I'm speaking to them without saying a word. They can relate to me different because at that moment, I am them.
Mm-hmm.
At that moment, I am attainable.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I got a master's degree in human communication studies. I can probably, if I wanted to, speak totally different if I chose to. But I choose not to because, one, I'm not embarrassed by the way that we as black folks communicate amongst each other.
Right.
I'm not embarrassed at the way we do things that are considered wrong. I don't look down on that. I don't follow the white man's rule on how we should present ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I choose not to do that, but I could, and you see a lot of other black folks that do that.
Right.
But when they do that, who are they communicating to? Who are they speaking to? Who are they speaking down to?
Right.
I refuse by design to do that. So yes, I will mispronounce some words. Yes, I will fuck up a sentence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I won't do it on purpose, but I don't feel ashamed of doing it because that's natural and that's who we are. And if I'm able to do this, and I do it all the time, but if I'm able to do that and know that you can still attain something by still having those flaws, then that's what it's all about. So I'm telling you that it's not being ashamed.
Yeah.
It's not apologizing to this system and to society for who I am and who I want to be. Because, like I said, that's something I'm very conscious of much younger individuals.
Okay. I'm going to wrap this up. And I got a question.
Uh-oh.
Bill Simmons
Okay.
had a show, short-lived, on HBO,
Any given Wednesday.
Any Given Wednesday. And in the promos leading up to the premiere of that show, he gave his manifesto about what he thought. I'm asking you right now, did Bill Simmons bite your manifesto that you wrote as your premiere article for ESPN? Go!
I would say this. And Bill, I know Bill very well. And I will say that
I mean, you wrote like a 20-point manifesto.
it was more like, I think it was 50. It was maybe it was a long, but it was still the most viewed piece I've ever written on ESPN. It was some crazy number, and people still come back to me about the things that I wrote in that. But I'll say this, man, and I'm not gonna give you a diplomatic answer. I'll give you an honest answer. One, I never thought about it that way. Two, I did a show for ESPN that was Jim Beam and ESPN did a joint venture show called The Next Round.
Yep.
Now, if you look at Bill Simmons' BS report, which came after that, the entire set was the set. The entire look, the entire aesthetic.
The high chairs, the bar stools.
Everything was taken from that. Now, I say that to say that the same set designer and the same producer started off doing that, but then they left that and did Bill's show. So they took their
idea
aesthetic over there to him. But that started with something I was involved in, I was doing first. Okay? So I'll say that to say that, is there a pattern? Could be. But here's the thing. I don't look at it as biting as much as I do, because like I said, I know Bill. You know what I'm saying? It'd be different if I didn't know him. And we're cool. I think there's a mutual respect that goes back and forth between us. And in knowing him and knowing the people that he's worked with and working with, I don't look at it as biting, as he said, damn, Scoop nailed that. I can nail it too. You know what I'm saying? So
I'll take that.
Right. So it's
I'll
not
take
like,
that.
He said, yes, he comes up with some good ideas. I could do the same thing. But I'll say this, since you mentioned Bill Simmons, to finish this off with you. People have started to ask me about when I'm going to shut down, when I'm retired, when I'm going to start, And my standard answer to them is, I'm not going to stop until they say Bill Simmons is the white Scoop Jackson.
This has been Entry Points. You can find us online at entrypoints.com. That's entrypts.com. Also, follow us on Spotify, follow us on Apple Podcasts, and find us anywhere and everywhere fine RSS feeds are consumed. See you next show.